Harley's new CEO just exposed the truth Jochen Zeitz tried to bury. Behind the chrome and marketing, Harley was on the edge of collapse, and it's worse than anyone thought. He finally admitted how leadership gambled loyalty for luxury, and the result nearly bankrupted the brand. If you've ever owned or thought of owning a Harley, you need to hear this. Because once you know what really happened, you'll never look at that badge the same way again. The admission. When the new boss took the mic, he didn't talk about profits. He talked about betrayal. The air in that room changed the moment Artie Starrs spoke those words. For years, riders had been dismissed as nostalgic, stuck in the past, clinging to chrome while the company chased investors in new markets. But now, standing in front of cameras and the press, Harley's new chief executive said the quiet part out loud. Riders were abandoned. That confession hit harder than any earnings report ever could. It wasn't corporate spin, it was something raw and rare. Honesty. For decades, riders carried the Harley name on their backs, across highways and heartlands. They kept the legend alive when times were rough. To hear a CEO finally acknowledge that loyalty had been repaid with neglect felt like a long overdue reckoning. Stars didn't promise miracles or quote analysts. He looked straight into the lens and said what every biker already knew. Harley had lost its way. That moment, simple and unscripted, felt like a helmet lifted after a long ride, relief mixed with the sting of windburn. What made it hit even deeper was who he replaced. Jochen Zeitz had been celebrated as the man who saved Harley from chaos, the architect of stability. Yet behind the curtain of shareholder praise was a growing silence in dealerships, a disconnect between the boardroom and the blacktop. Riders knew it, mechanics felt it, and now finally the company admitted it. As Stars spoke, you could almost hear the collective exhale from garages around the world. For once, a Harley executive wasn't blaming the market, tariffs, or changing tastes. He was owning up to betrayal. That moment didn't just make headlines. It reopened a conversation about what Harley means to the people who made it more than a brand, a brotherhood. But once the truth's out, you can't hide the wreckage it reveals. The hangover. They called it strategy. We called it a lockout. The plan was shiny on paper. Fewer models, tighter inventory, higher prices. Wall Street cheered as if Harley had reinvented luxury. But out on the street, riders felt something else, the door closing. The hardwire plan, Zeitz's grand design, was supposed to streamline the brand, to make Harley desirable again. In practice, it turned the world's most democratic motorcycle into an exclusive badge for the few who could afford it. Dealerships that once buzzed with the hum of new deliveries started to sound like empty warehouses. Mechanics sat idle. Small-town owners who had built their lives around the brand began to wonder if they were next to go. Fewer bikes meant fewer customers. Higher prices meant more dreamers walking away. What had once been a symbol of freedom was now tangled up in spreadsheets and scarcity. Harley's roar was replaced by corporate quiet. The strategy spoke the language of margins, not miles. Zeitz wanted Harley to be premium, to chase the kind of customers who bought cars as status symbols. But that vision clashed with the people who actually rode, those who worked overtime to save for their first Harley, who polished it every Sunday, who lived for the ride, not the label. For them, the hardwire plan wasn't a masterstroke. It was a message. You're no longer the priority. Riders noticed the shift before the stockholders did. The chrome gleamed brighter, but the soul dulled. Showrooms stopped feeling like meeting spots and started feeling like luxury stores where you didn't belong unless you were rich. And that realization, that sense of being pushed out of your own culture, did more damage than any quarterly loss ever could. And the first sign that Harley had lost its soul came on a silent bike that cost $30,000. If you felt Harley drift from its roots, hit like right now, because every click tells the suits we're still here and we're still watching. Drop your thoughts below. When did you first feel the brand change? Your story matters, and your voice keeps this conversation roaring forward. The silent bike. You can't plug in loyalty. And Harley learned that the hard way. When the company rolled out the LiveWire, it promised a revolution, electric performance with Harley's attitude. On launch day, it looked like the future, sleek, quiet, futuristic. But to the people who built this brand with grease on their hands and thunder in their ears, it felt alien. The LiveWire didn't just run on electricity, it ran against everything Harley stood for. It wasn't the technology that failed, it was the detachment. The bike had no rumble, no pulse, no sense of rebellion. It whispered instead of roared. And when riders looked at the price tag, nearly $30,000, they didn't see innovation, they saw arrogance. The LiveWire became less a beacon of progress and more a symbol of how far leadership had drifted from its roots. No rider asked for silence. Thunder was identity, forged in miles and storms, not labs. The LiveWire promised evolution but felt like exile. When sales crashed, Harley spun, splitting the brand to mask failure. Loyal riders felt erased. The future Harley sold no longer had room for them. And as the batteries drained, so did the numbers. Don't overpay at the shop. Check the description for the gear and accessories I recommend. Back to it. The red dashboard. When the numbers go red, every rider feels it. Behind every dip in the charts were faces. Mechanics, dealers, riders, and families whose livelihoods revolved around this brand. Harley's retail sales in North America slid downward. Shipments dropped. Dealers started closing their doors. The company called it a strategic recalibration, but to the people on the ground, it looked like heartbreak. A Harley dealership was never just a store, it was a gathering place. The Saturday rides, the smell of oil and coffee, the laughter between chrome and leather, all of it began to fade. Small towns that had once thrived on Harley tourism now faced shuttered windows and quiet main streets. Jobs vanished. Communities that once wore the bar and shield like armor felt abandoned. The numbers on Wall Street didn't show that pain, but riders lived it every day. Investors flinched as Harley's proud stock turned cautionary. Earnings fell, shipments stalled, and faith eroded. The company wasn't losing sales, it was losing itself. Harley once sold belonging, not machines, but when leadership forgot that freedom is the product, every red number became a warning from the road's fading heart. And just when we thought the damage was local, politics rolled in to make it national. The tariff blame. Every time a tariff hit, our bikes got pricier, and our paychecks didn't. That was the reality no press release could hide. Harley's leadership blamed the global trade wars, saying it was Washington and Brussels that made their bikes unaffordable overseas. But the truth was simpler and harder to swallow. The tariffs might have been real, but the cost wasn't falling on governments. It was falling on riders. Prices went up, not because of patriotism or politics, but because someone needed to protect the profit margins. And once again, it wasn't the suits who paid. It was us. When the trade battles between the United States and the European Union heated up, Harley became the perfect talking point. The company said European tariffs on American motorcycles made it impossible to compete. So instead of finding creative ways to absorb those costs or fight for better deals, Harley took the easy route. They passed the bill to the people who loved the brand most. A touring bike that once cost $20,000 crept toward $30,000. The same machine, same steel, same soul, but now out of reach for thousands of loyal customers. Riders saw through it. Tariffs ended, prices didn't. Harley used politics to mask profit, turning loyalty into collateral. Bikes aren't tickers, they're lifelines, dreams passed down. Watching costs rise while executives blamed others felt like betrayal disguised as economics, and riders knew the truth. Trust had been sold. So Harley tried to dodge the tariffs and ended up dodging its own roots. The Thailand detour. They stamped "Made in Thailand" on a piece of our identity. Harley's answer to rising tariffs wasn't reform, it was relocation. When headlines announced that production was moving to Thailand, riders across America felt their stomachs drop. The company framed it as a smart global decision, a way to stay competitive and avoid trade barriers. But for those who grew up believing in the phrase, "Made in America," it felt like a slap in the face. We grew up calling it American Steel. The name Harley-Davidson meant more than a brand. It was a piece of the country's fabric. It stood for grit, pride, and the belief that something made here could conquer the world. Seeing that badge suddenly attached to a bike built halfway across the globe felt like watching a flag folded and put away. Harley didn't just move production lines. It exported a piece of its soul. Executives called it temporary, but riders knew better. Outsourcing never stops at one shipment. Tariffs became excuses. Efficiency became betrayal. Workers felt replaced. Dealers struggled to sell American freedom stamped abroad. Each crate from overseas whispered the same truth. Harley's definition of loyalty had changed, and everyone could feel it. And when riders started asking questions, Wall Street offered a different kind of fix. With $1 billion leash, the Wall Street Lifeline. They said it was a partnership. We heard desperation. When Harley announced fresh funding from firms like KKR and PIMCO, the headlines spun it as a bold move. Capital to fuel the comeback, confidence from big investors. But on the factory floors and in the garages, people didn't see it that way. It didn't feel like confidence. It felt like collateral. Harley's finance arm, once a bridge to ownership, became a bargaining chip. The strategic deal looked like pawning heritage for breathing room. Cash bought time, not trust. Riders asked why freedom now needed financiers. Seeing Wall Street stamped on payment slips, many felt the brand had mortgaged its soul. Money can't buy authenticity. The brand that preached freedom was now signing IOUs. And while Harley claimed the move was about stability, everyone could see the cracks. It wasn't growth, it was survival disguised as expansion. The cash flow looked better on spreadsheets, but the sense of control slipped further away. And right when the money arrived, the politicians smelled opportunity. The campaign ride. Suddenly, every politician wanted a photo on a bike they'd never ride. As Harley's struggles made national headlines, it became a stage prop for speeches about jobs, trade, and patriotism. One week, it was a symbol of American pride. The next, it was proof of corporate greed. Each side twisted the story to fit their message, and once again, the people who actually built and rode the bikes got lost in the noise. Candidates strutted into plants wearing borrowed jackets and safety glasses, promising to protect American manufacturing. They revved the engines for the cameras and talked about saving jobs, then flew off in private jets while factories quietly cut staff. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was humiliation. Harley wasn't a trophy to hold up for votes. It was a living culture with real people trying to survive. Riders saw through it. Politicians weren't fighting for them, but over them, turning Harley into a campaign prop. Lobbyists chased subsidies while workers became stage scenery. Freedom turned cliché, its roar muted by speeches. Revival wouldn't come from podiums. It had to begin in factories, where real hands shaped steel. While cameras flashed, riders and workers were still fighting for the factory floor. The price ladder. We don't need discounts. We need a fair way in. That was the message riders had been shouting for years, and now, finally, it reached the boardroom. Harley's new leadership knew that saving the brand wasn't about slashing prices or chasing trends. It was about rebuilding trust by making the dream attainable again. For decades, Harley had been the motorcycle you worked for, something you earned, not just bought. But under the old regime, that dream drifted out of reach. Now, the new plan aimed to fix that, one price point at a time. The goal was simple but bold: rebuild a ladder instead of a wall. Bring back accessible entry models that still looked and felt like real Harleys. For too long, the company believed that exclusivity equaled strength, that if prices climbed, the brand's prestige would follow. But prestige means nothing if no one's left to carry the torch. The new CEO understood that Harley's strength was never in being rare. It was in being recognized. It wasn't about being a luxury. It was about being a legacy. Riders felt cautious hope. maybe this time the suits were listening. Affordable models meant dignity, not discount, a fair way in without losing pride. But numbers alone can't fix a heartbeat. Accessibility means nothing if the bikes lack soul, and forgiveness fades fast when passion turns to indifference. But even the right price means nothing if the bikes feel wrong. The rhythm reset. We don't need 20 models, we need the right ones. That sentence became the battle cry in Harley's design meetings. The company had lost its rhythm, flooding the market with too many bikes chasing too many audiences. It was like a band trying to play every genre and forgetting its own sound. The new leadership promised to tune the brand back to its core melody: craftsmanship, reliability, and pride. The plan wasn't about shrinking ambition, it was about sharpening it. Instead of a crowded showroom of similar-looking bikes, riders would see a focused lineup, each model built for purpose. The touring line would stay pure and thunderous. The cruisers would keep their attitude but drop their excess. The Sportster, long a gateway to Harley ownership, would be reborn with new power and old soul. It was a rebalancing of heritage and innovation, not through flashy redesigns but through discipline. Reliability became Harley's new mantra. After years of uneven quality, every weld and bolt now had to earn its badge. Stricter checks, tighter warranties, and revived pride reshaped the brand. Dealers revived, mechanics believed again, and riders felt it. Harley wasn't chasing image anymore. It was rebuilding trust through excellence. And that perfection starts with building bikes that speak our language again. The youth revival. Harley forgot to hand the keys to the next generation. That realization hit as hard as any financial report. For too long, the brand marketed nostalgia to a shrinking crowd and ignored the riders who would define its future. The new leadership understood that saving Harley meant handing the throttle to younger hands without losing the soul that made the brand sacred. The answer wasn't to lecture young riders about tradition. It was to invite them into it. That meant building smaller, lighter motorcycles that still looked, sounded, and rode like Harleys. Machines that could slip through traffic during the week and roar down highways on the weekend. But it wasn't just about the bikes. It was about belonging. Mentorship programs, riding schools, and community events became the backbone of a movement to pass the flame forward. The message was simple. The brotherhood isn't a club you buy into. It's a road you join. Harley rewrote financing to match real life. Low-interest loans, trade-ups, and loyalty rewards turned dreams into keys. Student debt and rent no longer barred entry. Families felt it too. Someday became let's ride. Chrome to chrome, road to road. Harley wasn't just selling bikes, it was saving culture. But not every young rider wants noise. Some want innovation. The trick is giving them both. We're only halfway through Harley's fight to take the keys back. If you've ridden this far, make sure you subscribe. The Halo Bike. Electric can't replace thunder, but it can light the road ahead. That was the new rule guiding Harley's next chapter. The company had learned its lesson from the LiveWire disaster. Electrification isn't the enemy, arrogance is. Riders never rejected the idea of progress. They rejected being forced to trade their soul for silence. This time, Harley was doing it differently. Instead of pretending electric was the future for everyone, the brand reimagined it as the Halo, a space for experimentation, not replacement. The LiveWire would live on as a lab for innovation, exploring new designs, batteries, and software that could one day influence the rest of the lineup. But the heart of Harley, the V-twin, the rumble, the ritual, would remain untouched. That balance between the past and the future became the cornerstone of the rebuild. Younger riders embraced honesty, wanting to expand legacy, not erase it. By making electric optional, Harley turned division into curiosity. Old-school riders admired, newcomers connected. The vision ahead blends grit with progress, thunder with voltage. Harley no longer outruns its past. It learns from it, rebuilding not modernity, but wholeness. And while the factory retools, the fight for fairness begins on the factory floor. The factory fight. The men and women who built our dreams are fighting for their own. Behind every Harley badge, there's a pair of hands that shaped steel, welded frames, and polished chrome until it gleamed like pride itself. Those hands are now demanding what they've earned: fairness, respect, and a future. On the factory floors, the conversation isn't about marketing slogans or investor confidence. It's about paychecks that stretch thin, contracts that keep shrinking, and the fear that the next round of cuts might come for them. Unions have returned to the front line, not as relics of a bygone era, but as the last line of defense for a working-class legacy. Apprenticeships, once the backbone of American manufacturing, are being revived to ensure that new generations learn the craft that made Harley famous. The workers aren't asking for charity, they're asking for partnership. They know that if the company wants to rebuild, it has to start with the people who build the bikes. There's pride on those floors, even in the struggle. Every weld and torque isn't just labor, it's lineage. Parents who spent decades on the line want their children to inherit a trade, not a headline about layoffs. "We build freedom," one worker said during a local rally, "but freedom's worth nothing if you can't afford to live it." Their fight isn't just economic, it's symbolic. They're defending more than jobs, they're defending Harley's soul. And yet, even if the line keeps moving, the investors have their own stopwatch. Wall Street's countdown. 2 seasons. That's how long we've got before the suits pull the plug. That's the quiet message moving through financial circles. Wall Street doesn't care about the smell of oil, the sound of engines, or the brotherhood forged on highways. It cares about margins, inventory turns, and quarterly guidance. To them, Harley is a ticker symbol, a number that either climbs or crashes. But to riders, those numbers are people, towns, and traditions. Investors are watching every metric like hawks. Retail sales must rise. New models must hit targets. Shipments must match forecasts. The company has 2 fiscal seasons to prove that the turnaround plan works. If the numbers slip, funding dries up. If margins collapse, leadership faces pressure. Every rally, every sale, every review becomes part of a silent countdown that determines whether Harley remains independent or becomes another acquisition headline. Inside dealerships, the tension is visible. Sales teams know that each bike rolling out the door isn't just revenue, it's a vote of confidence. In the factories, engineers double-check designs, aware that a single defect could ripple through the stock price. The new CEO promised riders that the company would listen again, but now Wall Street is listening too, and their patience costs interest. It's a strange symmetry, investors counting dollars, riders counting miles. But one thing's clear, both sides are watching. And if Wall Street counts dollars, riders count stories. And ours isn't over yet. The riders vote. You can't rebuild trust with ads, only with asphalt. That's what the community keeps saying. The real test of Harley's redemption isn't in board meetings or press conferences. It's in the rallies, the open roads, and the parking lots where friendships outlast the machines themselves. The riders are the final jury, and their verdict won't be written on paper. It'll be heard in the roar of engines this summer. Across the country, local chapters are seeing sparks of life again. Veteran riders who once swore off Harley are showing up to community events, curious about the new direction. Dealers are sponsoring road trips and veterans rides, not as publicity stunts, but as gestures of goodwill. The company is sending its new leadership out from behind microphones and into the crowds, shaking hands, listening, and, for the first time in years, showing up where it matters. Loyalty is on probation as riders remember years of neglect, rising prices, fading quality, and boardroom talk replacing brotherhood. Forgiveness demands proof, not promises. Each model, each drop, each answer earns it back. The rallies will reveal the truth, because Harley's heart doesn't beat in Milwaukee. It roars wherever chrome meets sunlight, because the real ending isn't in Milwaukee, it's in every garage in America. The road ahead. A confession can start redemption, but only if we ride it home. The new CEO's words lit a spark, but it's the riders who decide whether that spark becomes a fire or fades into the wind. The factory can build the bikes, The board can approve the budgets, and the investors can crunch the numbers. But without the riders, there's no Harley. The company's fate is now in the hands of the very people it once left behind. This moment feels like a crossroads between memory and movement. Harley's leadership has promised to rebuild from the ground up, but the path forward isn't paved with slogans. It's paved with sweat, trust, and steel. Riders want to believe, to see the company they love rediscover its heart. But belief now comes with caution. No one's ready to hand out blind loyalty again. This time, the road to redemption has to be earned mile by mile. The hope lies in what Harley still represents: freedom, rebellion, and connection. Those values don't age, they adapt. A generation raised on electric cars and gig work still craves authenticity. They still want the feeling of command, of control, of belonging to something real. If Harley can meet them halfway, keeping the soul while embracing the future, it might not just survive, it might lead again. For now, the story remains open-ended. The confession has been made, the rebuild has begun, the verdict is still riding toward the horizon. Every decision, every rally, every bike that rolls out of a dealership adds a line to that unfinished story. The truth's out. The ride's not over. It's just back in our hands. The road doesn't end here, it just turns. Harley's truth is out. The fight for its soul has begun, and what happens next depends on us. Every rider, every story, every voice shapes the next mile. Stay loud, stay proud, and keep the throttle open, because legends only die when we stop believing.